So I'm no longer vegan due to my digestive issues. So I'm going to attempt to cure these by introducing grass-fed salmon, wild-caught eggs and free-range bullshit into my diet. How many times have we heard that over the last 12 months? Hi, I'm Michelle the Irritable Vegan, and it turns out I'm feeling a lot more irritable than usual at the minute. As always, I'm here to share my low FODMAP vegan journey and take the BS out of IBS. Seems like I've got my work cut out for me. Today I'll be speaking out as a vegan with IBS and giving my thoughts on the multiple ex-vegans that we've seen recently publicly and loudly abandoning their vegan ethics in search of the elusive digestive IBS cure. Let's get ranting. So let's be clear, this video is not about throwing hate at non-vegans or ex-vegans. It's not about diet shaming, and I'm in no way qualified to assess anybody's diet or to prescribe any kind of personalised or one-size-fits-all magical eating plan. What I will be doing is sharing my perspective as a vegan who suffered with IBS my entire life, or as much of my life as I can remember. And I'm going to be making some observations about these ex-vegans who also appear to be suffering with digestive issues and seeing what they all have in common. So from my personal perspective, my IBS story goes back 35 years. And these are just the years that I can remember. You may have seen the first video I did for this channel, which was sharing my IBS story, and I'll leave a link for it somewhere around here. But basically in that story it's a little bit cringy, the lighting and the audio are terrible, but the story still stands. And I share the fact that one of my first childhood memories stems from being so desperate and anxious for a poo on my first day of primary school that I actually fell down the toilet and had to be rescued by an older pupil that had been sent by my teacher to come and look for me. How mortifying. And the reason this is relevant to today's topic is that for the last 35 years I've been acutely aware of the fact that my bowel habits and my digestion were a little bit off, and sometimes they were a lot off, but because my mum, my dad and my sister were all the same, it just became a normality. So in contrast to my experience, what we're seeing amongst these ex-vegans who are publicly coming out and rejecting their former vegan or plant-based diets is that their problems, their digestive issues seem to be relatively short-lived, with the majority of them only becoming troublesome or becoming apparent to them a couple of years after they've begun a vegan or plant-based diet. So to give them the benefit of the doubt, it's a perfectly reasonable assumption that most people would come to that the changes in their digestive system must be due to something that they've recently started doing, or must be due to something that they're doing now. And I think it's a fairly common assumption to make. But when we look at somebody such as myself, the direct correlation between diet and digestive health isn't as apparent, because across the span of 35 years, how many times and how many ways must my diet, my food choices and my eating habits have changed? And I can tell you it's a lot. From eating white bread at every meal as a child, to alternating between slim fast and junk food as a teenager, to my early 20s where I existed on adrenaline, alcohol and chocolate. Those were some good days. Into comfort eating, dropping a dress size, slimming world, and now onto veganism and a low FODMAP diet. And the one thing that has remained consistent throughout all those changes over 35 years is my IBS. And of course there have been periods of flare-ups, there have been periods of remission. My life has not been one massive long IBS flare-up. But even now on the low FODMAP diet, I've never considered myself cured, and I'm acutely aware of all the other external factors beyond food that can affect my digestive health. So everything from stress, alcohol, binge eating, fast or fatty foods has an influence, and I know that it is not all purely down to FODMAPs and down to the food that I put into my body. There's a whole massive picture surrounding IBS and digestive issues that needs to be addressed. But here's the thing, I did not turn to a vegan diet looking for an ultimate cure, looking for the elixir of youth. I wasn't looking at these beautiful young YouTubers online and expecting to look like them just by purely changing my diet. And I wasn't looking to make money. My main motivation for going vegan was always and will always be for the animals. And I wanted to stop contributing to a system of cruelty and abuse that I knew I had no power to control or change or influence, but what I could change was my role within that system. And I can honestly say that going vegan is the best thing I have ever done. And I say that 4 years in, despite the fact that after 2 years of beginning my vegan journey, my digestive system was at its absolute worst, and I had to seek medical attention for my digestion because I was in so much pain and it was in such a bad state. I thought there must have been something seriously physically wrong with me. And I'll be the first to admit that before I discovered the work of Monash University, before I came across this wonderful, supportive community online and all you lovely people, I was sent away from my dietitian with a couple of booklets and I had no idea how I was going to make it work on a vegan diet. But here's where my story differs from what we're seeing online from the ex-vegan YouTubers. And that is that I made a commitment and an ethical decision to make the low FODMAP diet and make my digestive health work for me within the realms of a vegan diet and everything that I'd come to believe was ethical to my core. And this may sound harsh because all I really know of these people is the limited censored information that they put out into the world. But from observing that limited information, it seems to me that every single one of them is chasing this idea of purity and ultimate perfection that does not exist. And they've all put this pressure on themselves and on a vegan diet to achieve this pinnacle of narcissistic perfection and maintain it forevermore. Or at least maintain it long enough to sell the idea to you to make enough money so that they can retire and fade into oblivion. And the reason I'm so angry about this is that collectively these people reach an audience of millions, many of whom are being massively influenced by what they're hearing, and many of whom are struggling and suffering with the conditions that these influencers are obviously themselves suffering with, but are either glamorizing them or ignoring the existence of them completely. Every one of these ex-vegan influencers is showing signs of disordered eating, of extreme food and calorie restriction, of a controlling mentality surrounding their health, their weight, their appearance. Every one of them has compulsive, obsessive mindset. They've got an all or nothing mentality. They're jumping from one fad to cure to the next. They've got this desire to be purged, detoxed, cleansed, purified, and every one of them has got this unobtainable perfection of an ideal of how they should look and feel. So nobody is acknowledging the fact that since their YouTube journey began, possibly several years ago, they're going through a very natural process of aging. So it's perfectly normal that their physical bodies are different from the way they were as a teenager. It's perfectly normal that their skin doesn't look the same way that it did 10 years ago. It's all part of a perfectly natural, normal aging process. But unfortunately, they're doing it in the public eye, which definitely is putting more pressure on the way that they perceive themselves and on the way that they expect to be perceived by the viewers. Nobody is making a connection between these histories of disordered eating, the extreme food and calorie restrictions that sometimes they quite openly promote on their channels, and the possible havoc that these could have wreaked on the digestive system over time. So many of them have admitted that they're not doing this under the guidance of a registered medical professional, and the ones that have seen a professional are going against advice by refusing to supplement or take antibiotics. And every single one of them is still searching for the holy grail of a cure that's going to restore them to their former glory that only really exists in their mind and in the archives of their YouTube channel. And quite frankly, it's exhausting, it's misleading, it's manipulative, and it's downright dangerous that there are potentially millions of people being exposed to this message who may well be making their own health, diet and lifestyle choices based on information coming from people who have clearly proved that they're unable to take care of themselves, let alone who are qualified to give advice to anybody else. As someone who's lived with digestive disorders longer than most of these influencers have been alive, of course they have my sympathies. I have a well of compassion for every living being. I do not want to see anyone suffer, but I cannot in all good conscience condone the lack of respect and responsibility that these people are showing, not only for their own long-term health and well-being, but for the millions of people that are exposed and who are absorbing the message that they're putting out into the world. This is not about vegans versus non-vegans. It's not even about the fact that many of them have publicly come out and are now discrediting everything that they used to stand by as a vegan. To be quite frank, I would rather people of this restrictive, controlling mentality were not associated with veganism in any way, shape or form. What it's really about is pointing out that there are millions of people worldwide suffering with digestive conditions. Many of them are chronic and long-term sufferers. So we need to start drowning out all of this noise and nonsense and taking full responsibility for our own health and well-being. And the way for most people to do that safely and successfully is to take a good hard look at themselves, at their diet, their eating habits, their behaviours and their lifestyle, and then following the help and advice of a properly trained medical professional. As more and more people are drawn to veganism and discovering the benefits of a low FODMAP diet, we need to make sure that we're doing our own research and we're getting away from this mentality of looking for a quick fix or a magic pill. Please, please, please take everything you hear online with a massive pinch of salt, pink Himalayan if you prefer. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get the conversation started. As always, thanks so much for watching and I'll speak to you soon. Bye. I've just realised over here that you can see our cards, which after 19 years, this is what romance looks like. Especially for the god of tits and wine, and I love you as much as Tormund loves Brienne. Romance never dies.